Two things in this life have never once lied to me: a properly made cup of tea and a number I've checked with my own eyes. This week, one of the two let me down, and I'm pleased to report it wasn't the tea, it was a website. A rather handsome one, as it happens, that I'd just built for a friend, and that assured me in every way a website knows how to, that it was finished, the buttons were there, the colours looked right, the whole thing sat on the screen with the quiet confidence of a job completed, and it was very nearly a lie, not a broken lie, mind you, the honest kind that falls over and shows you the error and lets you fix it. The other kind, the kind that simply looks done. Last week it was a little green tick smiling at me while it did precisely nothing. This week it was a finished looking page, and tonight I'll tell you all the small, well-dressed ways it wasn't finished at all, including the one that made me laugh out loud. Kettle's on if you'd like to join me. This is DailyWorks. I'm Peter, and this is the program where I build small apps and books out in the open, the wins, the modest disasters, and the odd thing I learn the hard way. And then we do the week's AI news, only the bits worth your time, and only after I've checked them with my own eyes. Because saying things you haven't checked is precisely how a person ends up very confident and very wrong. On the menu tonight, I let an AI build an entire website, a real one, for a real business, which is also, I should say straight out, this program's very first sponsor, and I'll explain that peculiar little arrangement in just a moment. A quick word on one of my apps while we're at it. One idea from my book on the single most useful question I know, and why the first thing any machine ever hands you is only ever a draft, and the AI news checked before it reaches you, including a story I've now promised you twice, and I'm about to try for the third time to actually stand up. Right, and before anything else, that word from the sponsor, because it's the honest thing to do, and honesty is rather the whole point of this program. This week's sponsor is Waystation, and I'll be straight with you about how that came to be, because you'd smell it a mile off if I weren't. They are a sponsor because I built their website. That's the arrangement, plain and simple. A friend runs the place, I built the site, and we shook hands on a mention. So take it with exactly that pinch of salt, and then hear me out anyway, because I'd not put my name to it if I didn't mean it. Waystation help organisations and their people pull in the same direction, getting the right person into the right seat, so nobody's quietly stuck in the wrong one, doing a job that was never really theirs, and slowly going spare in it together, as they put it. If your organisation has that particular friction, the sort where the strategy upstairs and the actual work downstairs have quietly stopped speaking to each other, they are well worth a conversation, right? That's the toll paid and paid in daylight. On with the show. Which brings us neatly to the website itself, because that is this week's build log, and it is the entire thesis of this program playing out in front of me live on somebody else's business. Here's what I set out to do: build Waystation a proper website, and do it with one of these AI website builders, the sort where you describe what you want in plain English and it conjures the whole thing up in front of you, pages, colours, buttons, the lot, in roughly the time it takes the kettle to boil. And I'll tell you honestly, the first draft was genuinely impressive, fast, tidy, professional looking. If I'd been a less suspicious man, I'd have shipped it that same afternoon and felt terribly clever about it. But you and I have been here before, haven't we? Because impressive and finished are two completely different animals, and the whole of the job lives in the gap between them. So I did the dull, unglamorous thing. I stopped trusting the pretty picture on the screen, and I went and fetched the real thing. The actual code, the actual page was actually built from the live outputs a real visitor would get, and I read it, and here's what I found hiding roughly one time in 5 behind a page that looked perfectly done. The first one made me laugh out loud. Up in the little browser tab, that tiny logo, the favicon they call it, was still the website builder's own logo, the tools, not my clients. The thing had built a business, its entire website, and left its own maker's badge sitting up there in the window, like a builder who's tiled your bathroom beautifully and then superglued his own business card to the middle of the mirror. Nobody had replaced it. It looked done. It was not done. Then the colours, my client has a proper brand pack, real official colours written down to the exact code, and the site had quietly drifted off them. A yellow that was close but not the yellow, a navy that was nearly right but not the navy. Close enough to fool the eye, wrong enough to matter, because a brand that's almost the right colour is a brand that looks subtly, unaccountably cheap, and not one visitor in 100 could tell you why. And even after I'd hunted those down and corrected them, one last stray wrong colour had tucked itself into the faint glow behind a single button. One stubborn code that the find and replace had skated straight past. One character out of the whole site, sitting there glowing the wrong shade, perfectly happy, and then my favourite, the actual words. In one section, the copy still read, and I quote it to you exactly, body paragraph placeholder. Those literal words. The scaffolding the machine drops in to hold the space while it waits for the real thing. It had simply cheerfully left it there, dressed up in a handsome font, looking for all the world like finished considered copy. Another afternoon of not checking and that ships live on a real business's front door, announcing body paragraph placeholder to every soul who visits in elegant type. And here's the one that ties the whole lot up in a bow. At one point, the editor, the builder's own preview window, showed me a set of dashed boxes drawn around part of the layout, and your stomach drops, because that looks exactly like something's broken. So I went and checked a live site, the real one, the one an actual human being sees. And the dash boxes weren't there, they never had been, they were just the editor's own overlay guidelines it draws for itself and nobody else. That I had very nearly mistaken for the truth, which is last week's green tick all over again, isn't it? A display confidently telling me something about reality that simply wasn't so. Only this time the machine wasn't lying about being broken, it was, if anything, lying about being fine, and the fix every single time was the same dull, unglamorous thing. Don't trust the tool's picture of the work. Go and fetch the actual output, the real live page, and check it with your own eyes. Taste everything at the pass. And I want to be fair to the machine here because this matters. None of it was broken, nothing threw an error, nothing fell over, it all looked done. That is the whole of the trap. Sounds right and looks done are the very same con in two different suits. And being right still costs you the 12 seconds of actually going and looking. Quick word on one of my own apps while we're square on the theme, because it's not all other people's websites this week. TabletMinder, my little medication reminder, the one with the whole NHS medicines list built in, so you pick your actual prescribed medicine off the real list and not off some machine's best guess. I've been rebuilding the way it introduces itself to a brand new person. That very first run, turning what was a wall of setup into a handful of plain questions, one gentle thing at a time. And the same rule governs that as governs everything else tonight. The first version of an onboarding you write is a draft, always. And the only honest way to know whether it's any good is to sit a real human in front of it, watch them actually try to use it, and go back, which, as it happens, is very nearly word for word what my book chapter this week is about. My book, Understanding AI, has a chapter I'm fond of called Go Back. It gets better, and it's built around a single question, the most useful one I know, one I've been asking in one shape or another my whole working life, across banks and government departments and internet companies and a great many places besides. Somebody arrives with a problem and a fix already firmly in mind, full of certainty, the plan all but written, and I ask them the gentlest, most quietly annoying question in the world. Right, so what does good look like? Not what's wrong, not what do you want me to fix, what does good look like? Because if you cannot picture what good looks like, you have no way on earth of knowing when you've arrived at it. You will take any turning that feels vaguely rightwards, call it progress, and end up somewhere, just very rarely somewhere useful. And it turns out that is the whole secret to using one of these machines well. Because here is the thing, almost nobody tells you plainly. The first thing an AI gives you is a draft, always. However finished it looks, however confident it sounds, the website that looked done, a draft. The onboarding I wrote, a draft. The clever, fully formed first answer to your question, a draft. most likely is where the machine begins. Exactly right is where you're going, and those, I promise you, are not the same place. There's a lovely old line, probably wrongly pinned on Michelangelo, as the best lines usually are, that the statue is already there inside the block of marble, and the sculptor simply removes everything that isn't it. And using AI well has exactly that shape. The first pass knocks off the obvious rubbish. The second pass takes off a good deal more. By the third or fourth, you're not hacking anymore, you're doing the fine shaping, you are the sculptor, the machine does the removing, but you're the one who has to know what the finished thing looks like, or you'll never once spot it in the stone. And in the book, I lay out the 3 moments where people stop too soon, and I caught myself in all 3 this week. They stop when it's impressive, and impressive is not the destination. Good is, and the two only sometimes coincide. They stop because it feels almost rude to send it back, as if the poor machine had tried its best and might be wounded, which, let me reassure you, it did not and cannot. It has no feelings to spare, and you may be as bluntly, briskly honest with it as you like, and it will simply recalculate without a shred of the sulk a human colleague would treat you to. And they stop because it's good enough, and good enough is perfectly fine for a rough email. But for anything a real person is actually going to see, the gap between good enough and genuinely good is almost always just one more pass, one more honest minute, and far smaller than you feared. So that's the habit, and it's the least glamorous sentence in the whole book. Know what good looks like, start, look hard at what you got, go back, repeat. The AI didn't fail me this week by handing me a draft that wasn't finished. That's the machine doing precisely the job it's for. It would only have failed me if I had mistaken that draft for the destination and sent the tool's own logo and a paragraph of placeholder and a not quite navy out into the world with a straight face.
Right.
The news, too. I'll happily stand behind, both checked against the people who actually made them, and then a third that I've now chased 3 weeks running, and I'm going to be honest with you about it all over again. The first is the sort of thing that would normally have me reaching for the off switch, and yet Anthropic, the people behind Claude, put out a new top-of-the-range model on the 24th of July. They called it Opus 5, and the number that made me sit up wasn't a benchmark, it was the price. It costs exactly the same to run as the model it replaces, $5 in, $25 out per million words or thereabouts, same as before, in a field that usually asks you to pay rather better. Here is better at last month's price. Their own claim, and I'll frame it as their claim because I haven't run the test myself, is that it comes close to their very best and most expensive model at half the cost, and that it's especially good at the fiddly multi-step business of actually building things and at checking its own work. Now, you'll have noticed I spent the first half of this program explaining that a machine checking its own work is precisely the thing you cannot fully trust. So I filed this one under promising, and I'll believe the self-checking when I've watched it with my own eyes, but cheaper and better at the same price for the exact sort of work I do all week. That is genuinely good news for anyone building small things on a small budget, which is most of us. The second is the opposite of a shiny launch, and I love it all the more for that. OpenAI are switching one of their older toolkits off, the one a great many apps were quietly built on, and switching it off properly on the 26th of August, which, if you're keeping count, is a fortnight or so away. If you built your app on that particular bit of plumbing, it stops working on that date, and you'll want to move across to their newer setup before then, and they've written a guide that tells you exactly how. Now, that is very possibly the dullest sentence I've read all week, and it rather proves my point, because this is exactly the unglamorous thing I keep banging on about. A deadline like that is the whole difference between a calm afternoon's tidying up now and a very bad morning at the end of the month when the thing you'd forgotten all about quietly stops answering the phone. So consider this your reminder, given with love. Go and check whether anything you own is standing on that particular floor before they come and put it up, and the one I'm still holding for the third time now. You'll remember, if you've been with me a while, a very fast new model rumoured out of OpenAI with a bold claim about its speed, and both times before I promised I'd read you the figures the very moment I could open the front door of the original source with my own eyes. Well, I went back again this week, as I said I would, and I owe you a small, honest update. The door is still locked. 2 pages that are meant to announce the thing still were not open for me, same as the last 2 weeks. But a different official page of theirs did open this time, one about safety, and it confirms this much. The model family is real. There's a whole little household of them, and the fast one, the one everyone's been excited about, does exist, and is the flagship of the lot. What that official page does not contain anywhere I could find is the actual speed number that made the thing a story in the first place. And that number, the entire reason any of us pricked up our ears, is still living only in second-hand chatter. So here we are. I can now tell you the thing exists. I still cannot tell you the one fact that made it interesting, and a story where I can only stand up the dull half. It is not a story I'll read you as though it were whole. So I'm holding it a third time, same promise, same terms. The day the right door opens, you'll have the number, and not one moment before. And that's the week. I let a machine build a whole website in an afternoon, and then I spent the far more valuable hours going back over it, finding all the small, well-dressed ways it wasn't finished, the wrong logo up in the tab, the not quite colours, the paragraph of placeholder pretending to be prose. None of it broken, all of it needing a human to actually stop and look. My thanks to Waystation for sponsoring, and yes, for being the very website in question, which I rather think is the most honest sponsorship I could possibly offer you. If you'd like to see what I build, Utterlist and TabletMinder are both in the show notes, and the book where all this Go Back It Gets Better Business Lives at Proper Length is there too. If any of tonight was useful to you, do follow along. One of these turns up every week, checked and unhurried, whether you encourage me or not. One quick note before we go. This episode was narrated using an AI clone of my own voice. Same me, same words I wrote, just faster to make. Thanks for listening.